Picture this. Somewhere in the armpit of the galaxy, there's a massive space station called the Galactic Combat Arena. Think Roman Colosseum meets Vegas Casino, with about 10 times more neon and 20 times more ego. The whole thing is run by Commissioner Vex Thornblade, a 7-foot-tall purple alien who looks like someone crossed a praying mantis with a used car salesman. Vex has convinced himself he's the most sophisticated being in the known universe, which is hilarious considering he wears a cape made of what appears to be disco ball fragments. Now, Vex has spent the last 2 centuries organizing gladiatorial matches between the galaxy's most fearsome predators. We're talking creatures that could bench press a freight train and use laser beams as dental floss. The arena's motto? Only the apex survive. Catchy, right? About as catchy as a space plague. Enter Marcus Rodriguez, or, as absolutely nobody calls him anymore, Tank. Once upon a time, Marcus was climbing the ranks in Earth's MMA circuit. Then, he took one too many hits to the head, developed a nasty habit of losing fights, and somehow ended up as a janitor on the arena station. Yeah, the career trajectory of champions, folks. These days, Marcus spends his time mopping up alien blood and wondering where his life went wrong. Spoiler alert, it was somewhere around the 3rd consecutive knockout. The arena operates on a simple principle that Vex loves to explain to anyone within earshot. Advanced civilizations produce superior warriors, while primitive worlds like Earth produce nothing but soft, squishy disappointments. Vex has actually written a 3-volume dissertation on human weakness, titled Why Mammals Are Adorably Pathetic. Real page-turner, that one. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean catastrophically stupid. During one of his weekly cultural superiority lectures, Vex decides to prove his point by announcing that even the most laughably primitive species should get a chance to embarrass themselves in the arena. Pure theater, of course. What could possibly go wrong? Well, Dr. Penny Fitzgerald happened. Dr. Fitzgerald is Earth's most enthusiastic xenobiologist, and apparently someone who never learned that raising your hand during rhetorical questions is a bad idea. When Vex sarcastically asked if any backwater death world wanted to volunteer their adorable little creatures for the upcoming Apex Predator Championship, Penny's hand shot up faster than her common sense could stop it. "Take your pen," Penny Fitzgerald said. Oh, Earth volunteers!" she shouted from the audience, practically bouncing in her seat like an overexcited golden retriever. The entire arena went silent. Vex's mandibles actually clicked in what might have been surprise or indigestion. Marcus, who was mopping nearby, stopped mid-swipe and stared at the crazy human lady who just signed their species up for systematic annihilation. And that's how humanity accidentally entered the most dangerous gladiatorial tournament in galactic history. Because apparently when the universe hands you an opportunity to make a complete fool of yourself, humans grab it with both hands and ask for seconds. So naturally, the entire galaxy thought this was absolutely hilarious. I mean, humans? In the Apex Predator Championship? It was like watching someone bring a pool noodle to a sword fight, except the swords were also on fire and possibly sentient. Let me introduce you to the competition, because these weren't your average neighborhood bullies. First up, the Shard Warriors from Crystal X Prime. Picture a walking chandelier that went to anger management classes and failed spectacularly. These guys were literally made of living crystal, could regenerate limbs in seconds, and had the charming habit of launching razor-sharp projectiles from their bodies. Their battle cry sounded like someone dropping a china cabinet down an elevator shaft. Then we had the Kraken spawn from the oceanic depths of Tentacula 7. Imagine if an octopus hit the gym for about 50 years straight, developed a serious attitude problem, and learned how to breathe in any atmosphere. Each one had 47 tentacles, could crush titanium like bubble wrap, and secreted a paralytic venom that could drop a space rhino in 3 seconds flat. Delightful dinner companions, I'm sure. And finally, the crowd favorites, the razor claws from the volcanic hellscape of Slash Netburn. 6 arms, each ending in claws that could slice through starship hulls, exoskeletons harder than diamond, and the personality of a food processor having an existential crisis. They communicated entirely through aggressive chittering that roughly translated to various creative ways they planned to dismember their opponents. The betting pools were absolutely bonkers. Vegas would have been proud. Shard Warriors were running at 2-to-1 odds, Kraken Spawn at 3-to-1, and Razor Claws at 4-to-1. Humans? The betting boards didn't even have odds listed. They just had a little sign that said Participation Trophy Winners, with a crying, laughing emoji. Apparently, even galactic bookmakers have a sense of humor. Marcus found Dr. Fitzgerald in the registration area, frantically filling out paperwork with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't quite grasped the magnitude of her mistake. She was a short, energetic woman with wild, curly hair and the kind of optimism that usually gets people killed in horror movies. "Oh, Marcus," she chirped when she saw him. "Isn't this exciting? We're going to represent humanity in the greatest gladiatorial tournament in galactic history." "Doc," Marcus said slowly, "you do realize we're going to die, right? Like spectacularly and probably in high definition." "Nonsense," Penny waved her hand dismissively. "We just need to pick the right Earth creature to partner with. The rules clearly state each contestant must fight alongside their planet's most representative predator." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "So we're talking tigers, bears, great white sharks?" "Well, that's the thing," Penny said, suddenly looking a little less confident. "The Arena Committee has already made the selection for us. They want it to be fair." "Fair how?" Penny shuffled through her paperwork and pulled out an official-looking document with way too many alien signatures. "They've assigned us Earth's, quote, most docile and harmless creature to ensure we don't have an unfair advantage." Marcus felt his stomach drop somewhere around his ankles. "Please tell me it's at least a big, docile creature. Like a cow. I could work with a cow." Penny winced. It's a honey badger." The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for funerals or the moment before natural disasters. Marcus stared at her like she'd just told him they were partnering with a particularly aggressive houseplant. "A honey badger," he repeated slowly. "The committee was very thorough in their research," Penny said weakly. "Apparently honey badgers are small, fluffy, and, according to their databases, primarily eat honey. They thought it would be adorable." And that's when Marcus realized that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had just made the kind of research error that was about to bite them in their collective alien posteriors. Marcus stood in the arena's training facility, which was basically a concrete box with some scratching posts and what appeared to be alien gym equipment designed by someone who'd never seen a muscle. In the center of this inspiring space sat a cage containing 30 pounds of pure, concentrated attitude wrapped in deceptively fluffy fur. "Meet Sergeant Fluffernutter." Yes, that was actually the name on the transport crate. Apparently whoever shipped Earth's most docile creature had either a sense of humor or a complete misunderstanding of military ranks. The honey badger sat there, grooming itself with the casual indifference of someone planning a hostile takeover. "Okay, Sergeant," Marcus said, approaching the cage like he was defusing a bomb. "We're partners now. We need to work together, develop some strategies, maybe establish basic communication." Sergeant Fluffernutter looked up from his grooming, made direct eye contact with Marcus, and proceeded to bite through the supposedly indestructible cage lock like it was made of cotton candy. The lock, rated to contain creatures up to Class 7 dangerous, lasted approximately 3 seconds. That's not normal, right?" Marcus asked Dr. Fitzgerald, who was frantically flipping through her research notes. "According to my data, honey badgers are peaceful omnivores who primarily subsist on honey and small insects," Penny said, though her voice was getting that high-pitched quality that suggested impending panic. "They're supposed to be nature's teddy bears." Sergeant Fluffernutter had now completely freed himself and was investigating the alien gym equipment. He approached a gravity trainer designed for creatures 3 times his size, bit it experimentally, then proceeded to dismantle it with the methodical efficiency of a demolition expert having a really good day. "Doc," Marcus said carefully, "exactly what kind of research did the Arena Committee do?" Penny was now speed-reading through her notes like her life depended on it, which, let's be honest, it probably did. "Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. Marcus, I think there may have been a slight translation error in the galactic database." "What kind of translation error?" "The kind where feared by lions got translated as friends with bees and will fight anything regardless of size became enjoys peaceful meadow picnics." Meanwhile, Sergeant Fluffernutter had discovered the sparring dummies. These weren't your average training equipment, mind you. These were combat androids designed to simulate the fighting styles of galaxy-class predators. The honey badger looked at them, tilted his head thoughtfully, then launched himself at the nearest one with the battle cry of someone who'd been personally insulted by its existence. What followed could only be described as educational. The android, programmed with the combat patterns of 12 different apex predators, lasted exactly 47 seconds, before Sergeant Fluffernutter reduced it to what could charitably be called modern art. "He's supposed to be docile," Penny wailed, watching her career dreams get systematically dismantled along with the training equipment. Through the observation windows, Marcus could see alien spectators gathering. Word was apparently spreading that the human team was training. The Shard Warriors were pointing and making that crystalline tinkling sound that passed for laughter. The Kraken spawn were doing whatever tentacled creatures do when they're amused, which looked uncomfortable. And the Razor Claws were chittering, in what Marcus was pretty sure translated to, "This'll be over quickly." Commissioner Vex Thornblade himself appeared at the window, his disco ball cape catching the light as he observed the proceedings. His mandibles were clicking in that way that suggested either amusement or hunger, and honestly, Marcus didn't want to know which. "Look at the adorable little earth mammal," Vex announced to his entourage. "So fluffy and harmless. This'll be perfect entertainment before the real competition begins." That's when Sergeant Fluffernutter noticed the audience. He stopped mid-demolition of what used to be a punching bag rated for Class 9 warriors, turned toward the window, and made a sound that somehow conveyed his professional opinion of being called adorable. The aliens at the window suddenly took a collective step backward. Even through reinforced transparent aluminum, something in that honey badger's stare suggested that Fluffy was not how he wanted to be remembered. Marcus looked at his partner, then at the growing crowd of increasingly nervous alien spectators, then at Dr. Fitzgerald, who was now stress-eating her research notes. "Doc," he said quietly, "I think we might actually have a chance." "A chance to what?" Penny asked hopefully. "Survive long enough to traumatize some aliens." The day of the Apex Predator Championship dawned like every other day in space, which is to say it didn't dawn at all because there's no sun. But the arena's artificial lighting system kicked in with all the subtlety of a supernova having a temper tantrum. Marcus woke up in his assigned quarters to the sound of Sergeant Fluffernutter systematically destroying what used to be furniture. Apparently honey badgers don't believe in feng shui. "Good morning, partner," Marcus said, stepping carefully around the remains of a chair that had personally offended the honey badger sometime during the night. "Ready for the most important day of our probably very short lives?" Sergeant Fluffernutter paused in his demolition work, looked Marcus dead in the eye, and made a sound that roughly translated to, "I was born ready, and also, your interior decorating choices are terrible." The arena itself was a masterpiece of over-engineered intimidation. Picture a football stadium designed by someone who thought the Roman Colosseum wasn't quite murdery enough. 50,000 alien spectators filled the stands, representing every corner of the galaxy. The noise was incredible, like standing inside a blender filled with enthusiasm and bad life choices. Commissioner Vex Thornblade stood at the center podium, his disco ball cape reflecting the arena lights into 1,000 tiny rainbows of pretentiousness. His voice boomed through the sound system with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for opera singers having nervous breakdowns. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various non-binary energy beings," Vex announced, "welcome to the 473rd Annual Apex Predator Championship. Today we witness the ultimate demonstration of evolutionary superiority." The crowd went absolutely insane. Alien betting pools were updating in real time on massive holographic displays. The Shard Warriors were still favored at 2-1, despite having lost 3 of their training partners to accidental crystallization incidents. The Kraken spawn had improved to 3-1, after video footage emerged of one of them arm wrestling a cargo loader and winning. The Razor Claws remained steady at 4-1, probably because nobody wanted to get close enough to reevaluate their odds. And then there were the humans. The betting display for Marcus and Sergeant Fluffernutter now simply read, "Novelty Act. Entertainment value only." Someone had even added a little animation of a human stick figure running away from cartoon monsters. "Real classy. Galaxy. Real classy." In the blue corner, Vex continued with theatrical flourish, representing the crystalline perfection of Crystallix Prime, the Shard Warriors. Witness their flawless geometric beauty and razor-sharp precision. 3 living chandeliers strutted into the arena, each one catching the light like a disco ball having an identity crisis. They moved with the fluid grace of professional dancers, if professional dancers were made of glass and had serious anger management issues. The crowd's applause sounded like a percussion section falling down stairs. In the red corner, from the crushing depths of Tentacula 7, the Kraken spawn. Marvel at their devastating flexibility and paralyzing embrace. 2 massive octopoid creatures slithered into view, their 47 tentacles writhing in patterns that probably violated several laws of physics. One of them casually lifted a piece of arena equipment that weighed approximately 3 tons and tossed it aside like a pool noodle. The crowd's reaction was the kind of roar usually reserved for successful military campaigns. In the yellow corner, The pride of Slash-na-Burn, the Razor Claws. Fear their six-armed supremacy and diamond-hard exoskeletons. Four chittering nightmares scuttled into the arena, their multiple arms creating a blur of movement that looked like a food processor crossed with a medieval torture device. Each claw caught the arena lights with the kind of gleam that suggested they'd been recently sharpened on the bones of their enemies. The crowd's response was equal parts cheering and nervous gulping. And finally, Vex's voice took on the tone of someone about to deliver the punchline to the universe's longest joke. In the green corner, representing the primitive death world of Earth, we have Marcus Rodriguez and his adorably fluffy companion. The arena went dead silent for exactly 2.3 seconds, and then erupted into laughter that could probably be heard from the next solar system. Marcus walked into the arena, carrying Sergeant Fluffernutter, who surveyed the competition with the professional interest of a food critic examining a disappointing menu. "Look at them!" Vex practically giggled into his microphone. "The human appears to be carrying his partner like a household pet. How delightfully quaint." The alien crowd was eating this up. Marcus could see spectators literally pointing and laughing. Some enterprising vendors were already selling novelty foam fingers that said, "I watched humans fail spectacularly." The betting pools had updated again, now showing human survival time with odds ranging from less than 30 seconds to somehow still breathing after 2 minutes. But here's the thing about honey badgers that apparently never made it into the galactic database. They don't care about odds. They don't care about size. They don't care about having a reasonable chance of survival. What they care about is the deeply personal offense of being called adorably fluffy in front of 50,000 laughing aliens. Marcus felt Sergeant Fluffernutter tense in his arms. Not the good kind of tense, like a sprinter getting ready to race. The bad kind of tense, like a nuclear reactor that just had its safety protocols questioned. "Contestants, prepare for battle," Vex announced. "Let the 473rd Annual Apex Predator Championship begin." The starting horn sounded, a deep, resonant note that seemed to vibrate through the arena's superstructure. The Shard Warriors immediately began their crystalline war dance, pieces of their bodies extending into sharp projectiles. The Kraken spawns spread their tentacles in an intimidating display that covered roughly half the arena floor. The Razor Claws formed a defensive formation that looked like a blender designed by paranoid military strategists. And Sergeant Fluffernutter? Sergeant Fluffernutter looked up at Marcus with an expression that clearly said, "Put me down. It's time to educate some aliens about Earth biology." Marcus set his partner down on the arena floor and took a step back. Not because he was abandoning the fight, but because he had a sudden, crystal-clear understanding that he was about to witness something that would probably require therapy to fully process. "Go get him, Sergeant," he said quietly. The honey badger looked at the assembled alien predators, then at the laughing crowd, then back at Marcus. He nodded once, which somehow conveyed more determination than a dozen motivational speeches, and began walking toward the competition with the casual confidence of someone who had just been personally insulted by the entire concept of fear. The crowd's laughter began to fade as they realized that the adorably fluffy Earth creature was not in fact running away or cowering in terror. Instead, he was approaching 3 different groups of apex predators like he was headed to a business meeting where he planned to fire everyone. And that's when the real education began. What happened next will probably be studied in xenobiology textbooks for the next 1,000 years, assuming any xenobiologists survive to write them. Sergeant Fluffernutter reached the center of the arena, looked around at his competition like a quality inspector who just discovered a manufacturing defect, and made a decision that would fundamentally alter the galactic understanding of Earth's wildlife classification system. He chose the Shard Warriors first. Now, the Shard Warriors had been preparing for this moment their entire crystalline lives. They'd studied combat formations, practiced their razor projectile techniques, and developed a battle strategy that had won them championships across 17 different star systems. What they hadn't prepared for was a 30-pound furry missile that approached conflict resolution with the philosophical framework of, "I don't care what you're made of, I'm going through you." The lead Shard Warrior, who went by the intimidating name of Prism Deathbringer, launched a volley of crystal shards that could penetrate starship armor. These projectiles flew through the air with lethal precision, creating a deadly light show that had the crowd oohing and aahing like they were watching fireworks. Sergeant Fluffernutter looked at the incoming crystal death, tilted his head thoughtfully, and then did something that violated several laws of physics, common sense, and probably a few intergalactic treaties. He caught one of the crystal shards in his teeth, bit down, and the sound that emerged was like someone stepping on bubble wrap made of diamonds. The supposedly indestructible crystal shard shattered into sparkly dust. The arena went dead silent. That's not possible," Vex stammered over the intercom. "Crystal shard weapons are rated Class 9 destructive. They can cut through anything." Apparently, nobody had told Sergeant Fluffernutter about ratings. He spat out crystal dust, looked mildly annoyed at the taste, and began his advance on the shard warriors with the determination of someone who'd just been served a subpar appetizer. What followed was less a fight and more a masterclass in applied destruction. Sergeant Fluffernutter went through the shard warriors like a furry tornado with anger management issues. He didn't fight them so much as disassembled them, with the methodical efficiency of someone following an IKEA instruction manual in reverse. Crystal limbs went flying, expensive geometric formations became abstract art installations, and the sound of breaking glass filled the arena like a percussion symphony written by someone with serious emotional issues. Prism Deathbringer, the Shard Warriors champion and pride of Crystal X Prime, lasted exactly 43 seconds before Sergeant Fluffernutter reduced him to what could charitably be described as very expensive sand. The honey badger then did something that would haunt alien nightmares for generations. He looked at the pile of crystal dust, snorted dismissively, and moved on to the next course. The Kraken spawn had been watching this educational demonstration with growing concern. These were creatures that had never experienced fear, primarily because they'd never encountered anything on their home planet that could pose a threat to 47 tentacles worth of crushing power. That was about to change in ways their oceanic brains couldn't fully process. The largest Kraken spawn, a creature that stood 12 feet tall and weighed approximately 3 tons, decided to establish dominance through intimidation. It reared up to its full height, spread all 47 tentacles in a display that covered roughly half the arena, and released a roar that shook the station's superstructure. This was a sound designed by evolution to strike terror into the hearts of any creature with enough intelligence to understand its own mortality. Sergeant Fluffernutter looked up at this display, yawned, and began climbing. "Let me be clear about something. Honey badgers are not supposed to be able to climb 12-foot-tall octopoid aliens. It's not in any manual, it defies basic physics, and it definitely violates the arena's safety regulations." But nobody had apparently informed Sergeant Fluffernutter about what he wasn't supposed to be able to do. He went up that Kraken spawn like it was a furry elevator with attitude problems. Tentacles tried to grab him, but he was moving too fast and with too much malicious intent for their nervous systems to track. The poor Kraken spawn began making sounds that roughly translated to "Why is the small mammal winning?" in 17 different frequencies of panic. Marcus, watching from the sidelines, realized he needed to start participating in his own survival. The second Kraken spawn was circling around, probably planning to grab the human while his partner was busy redefining the food chain. Marcus had about 30 seconds to figure out how to fight a creature that could bench press a small starship. Then he remembered something his old MMA coach used to say: "When you're outclassed, don't fight their fight, make them fight yours." Marcus grabbed a piece of debris from the demolished shard warriors, a crystal shard about the size of a baseball bat, and began making noise. Not just any noise, but the specific kind of taunting, obnoxious noise that humans have perfected over millennia of being the galaxy's most annoying species. "Hey, calamari breath," he shouted at the approaching Kraken spawn. "Your tentacles look like overcooked spaghetti. Did you lose a fight to a pasta factory?" The Kraken spawn turned toward Marcus with the kind of focused rage usually reserved for personal vendettas. This was exactly what Marcus wanted, because now the alien was angry instead of tactical. Angry creatures make mistakes. Angry creatures, with 47 tentacles, make spectacular mistakes. The Kraken spawn lunged forward with all its considerable mass, tentacles spread wide to grab the annoying human. Marcus waited until the last possible second, then dove between two of the tentacles and came up swinging his improvised crystal bat. He connected with something that felt important, and the Kraken spawn made a sound like a deflating balloon orchestra. Meanwhile, Sergeant Fluffernutter had reached the first Kraken spawn's head and was having what could politely be described as a disagreement with its nervous system. The creature was now making sounds that didn't translate into any known language, but clearly expressed deep regret about its life choices. The crowd, which had started this match laughing at the humans, was now experiencing the kind of stunned silence usually reserved for natural disasters and tax audits. The betting pools had crashed completely, displaying error messages that roughly translated to, "This should not be mathematically possible." But the Razorclaws were still in the game and they were not amused. These creatures had spent centuries perfecting the art of dismantling opponents with surgical precision. They approached problems with six-armed efficiency and the kind of methodical violence that made accountants look spontaneous. They formed up in their standard attack formation, which looked like a blender designed by committee, and began their advance. That's when Marcus realized that Sergeant Fluffernutter was making a specific type of sound, not the general-purpose battle cry he'd been using on the Shard Warriors, or the focused destruction noise from his encounter with the Kraken spawn. This was different. This was the sound a honey badger makes when he's moved beyond simple violence and into the realm of artistic expression. The first razor claw reached them just as Sergeant Fluffernutter finished his business with the second Kraken spawn. The honey badger turned to face the new threat, and Marcus swore he could see something like anticipation in those small, dark eyes. Here was something with proper claws, something that might actually require effort. The razor claw struck with six-armed precision, its diamond-hard claws moving in patterns that could slice through starship hulls. It was fast, it was deadly, and it was completely unprepared for an opponent who treated indestructible as more of a suggestion than a rule. Sergeant Fluffernutter caught the first claw, bit down, and the sound that emerged was like someone taking a power saw to a jewelry store. The supposedly diamond-hard claw cracked, then shattered, then became one more addition to the growing pile of things that used to be considered indestructible. The razor claw stared at its broken appendage with the kind of existential confusion usually reserved for philosophy students. This was not supposed to happen. Their claws were rated Class 10 destructive force. They had carved through mountains for fun. Sergeant Fluffernutter looked at the remaining 5 claws, then at the 3 other razor claws approaching, then at Marcus. His expression clearly conveyed a simple message: this might take a minute. And that's when the arena's structural supports began to fail. Apparently, the station's engineers had designed the facility to withstand the combat forces of known galactic predators. They had not designed it to withstand one extremely irritated honey badger with a point to prove. Commissioner Vex Thornblade's voice cracked over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appear to be experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm while we—" "What do you mean the main supports are failing? That's impossible. The arena is designed to withstand—" "What do you mean, rewrite the engineering manuals?" Marcus looked around at the chaos, at the demolished alien predators, at his partner who was now systematically working through the remaining razor claws like items on a to-do list, and realized something important. They might actually win this thing. The crowd was no longer laughing. The moment Marcus realized they might actually win this thing was the same moment the arena's emergency alarm system decided to join the party. Red lights began flashing in patterns that roughly translated to "abandon ship before something terrible happens," while automated announcements began blaring in 47 different languages, all of which basically said, this was not in the manual. Sergeant Fluffernutter was now down to his final opponent, the Razor Claw Champion, a creature called Six Arms of Inevitable Death, who had earned his name by carving his initials into 3 different moons. This particular alien had been watching his teammates get systematically educated about Earth biology, and had come to the reasonable conclusion that discretion was the better part of not getting turned into expensive scrap metal. "I forfeit," Six Arms of Inevitable Death announced, his voice translator crackling with what might have been relief. "I formally withdraw from competition." The remaining Kraken spawn, who was still trying to figure out why his nervous system wasn't responding to executive commands, managed to gurgle something that the arena's translation system interpreted as, "Me too, please let me go home to my mother." Commissioner Vex Thornblade stood at his podium, staring at the scene below with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been fed through a blender set to puree. His disco ball cape had somehow gotten tangled during the excitement, and was now casting confused rainbow patterns across his mandibles. This is irregular," Vex stammered into his microphone. "According to my calculations, Earth mammals are supposed to be soft and squishy and generally disappointing. They're not supposed to... What exactly did that creature just do to our arena's structural integrity?" A nervous assistant, who looked like a cross between a lobster and an accountant, scuttled up to Vex with a tablet displaying damage reports. "Sir, the preliminary assessment suggests that the Earth creature has somehow compromised 17 load-bearing supports, 3 primary power conduits, and what used to be our gift shop. How is that even possible? It's 30 pounds of fur. Sir, I think we may have made some errors in our research." Down in the arena, Marcus was trying to get Sergeant Fluffernutter's attention, which was like trying to negotiate with a natural disaster that had developed a personal grudge against physics. The honey badger was now examining the arena's reinforced flooring with the professional interest of someone who'd found a new project. "Sergeant," Marcus called out. "I think we won. Maybe we could wrap this up before you accidentally destroy the entire station." Sergeant Fluffernutter looked up from his structural analysis, seemed to consider this suggestion, then made a sound that roughly translated to, "Fine, but I'm filing a complaint with management about the quality of opponents." The crowd, all 50,000 alien spectators, sat in the kind of silence usually reserved for funeral services and tax audits. They'd come expecting to watch primitive Earth creatures get systematically dismantled by the galaxy's finest predators. Instead, they had witnessed what could only be described as a hostile takeover of the food chain by 30 pounds of concentrated attitude. Dr. Penny Fitzgerald, who had been hiding behind a structural support for the past 20 minutes, emerged with the expression of someone whose scientific worldview had just been personally insulted by reality. She was frantically taking notes on a tablet that kept displaying error messages. "Marcus," she called out, her voice pitched somewhere between hysteria and academic excitement, "I think we may need to revise some of our Earth biology textbooks." "Just some?" Marcus asked, looking around at the arena that now resembled the aftermath of a natural disaster with personality issues. Commissioner Vex had regained some of his composure, though his mandibles were still clicking in patterns that suggested deep psychological trauma. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with the forced cheer of someone trying to pretend everything was going according to plan, "we have our winners, the Earth team." The crowd's response was the kind of stunned applause usually reserved for magic tricks that nobody quite understood, but everyone suspected might be illegal. "However," Vex continued, and Marcus could hear the gears turning in his alien brain, "due to certain irregularities in today's competition, the Arena Commission will be implementing some new rules for future tournaments." Here it comes, Marcus thought, the cosmic fine print. "Effective immediately," Vex announced with the tone of someone reading his own professional obituary. "All Earth creatures are hereby banned from participation in Galactic Combat Arena events. This includes, but is not limited to, honey badgers, humans when accompanied by honey badgers, and any creature that exhibits what our xenobiology team is now calling unreasonable disregard for established physical laws." "Furthermore," Vex continued, his voice getting higher with each word, "Earth is hereby reclassified from primitive death world to do not engage under any circumstances. All diplomatic contact with Earth species should be conducted from a minimum safe distance of, let me check the preliminary safety recommendations, 3 star systems." The crowd was now murmuring in 17 different languages, all of which seemed to involve variations on, "I told you those humans look suspicious." Marcus walked over to collect Sergeant Fluffernutter, who was now grooming himself with the casual satisfaction of someone who'd just completed a successful home renovation project. The honey badger looked up at Marcus and made a sound that clearly conveyed, "Can we go home now? I'm hungry and these aliens taste terrible." "Ladies and gentlemen," Vex announced with finality, "the 473rd Annual Apex Predator Championship is hereby concluded. Prize money will be transferred to the Earth team, and please exit in an orderly fashion. Also, somebody call maintenance about the structural damage, and the gift shop, and possibly the theoretical physics department." 6 months later, Marcus was back on Earth, sitting on a beach in California with a bank account that had more zeros than he'd ever imagined possible. Sergeant Fluffernutter had been returned to his natural habitat, where he was presumably terrorizing the local ecosystem in more traditional ways. Dr. Penny Fitzgerald had published a paper titled Honey Badgers, a comprehensive re-evaluation of Earth's most underestimated species, which had become required reading in xenobiology programs across 17 different star systems. She was also fielding job offers from research institutions who wanted to study Earth's impossible biology. As for the galaxy at large, well, let's just say that Earth had suddenly become a very popular topic of conversation. The kind of popularity that involved phrases like, "maintain safe distance," and "do not approach without proper hazmat protocols." Marcus looked out at the sunset, sipped his drink, and reflected on the fact that humanity had accidentally convinced the entire galaxy that Earth was too dangerous to mess with, all because one over-enthusiastic scientist had volunteered them for a gladiatorial tournament and brought along a honey badger with an attitude problem. Not bad for a washed-up MMA fighter and 30 pounds of fur with anger management issues. The universe, Marcus decided, had a pretty good sense of humor after all, even if it took a honey badger to deliver the punchline.